Hello, good morning, everyone. I propose we get started, and people that are still joining will be led in the call by my colleagues, Felix. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Great to see that so many of you are interested in the topic of carbon accounting. And I think it's another proof point that it becomes more and more important for companies, but also countries, but companies to report on their climate impact and to start working on reducing their climate impact. So very happy to see so many of you here for this webinar. For those who don't know me, I'm Kenneth. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Carbon+Alt+Delete. At Carbon+Alt+Delete, we build software to calculate and reduce the carbon footprint of companies, the organizational carbon footprint, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Personally, I have a technical background, engineer by training. I always have been active in the energy and sustainability field, and a couple of years I founded Carbon+Alt+Delete. In the call, I have also my colleague Felix, which I think you also can see, and he will support me a bit with the practicalities, but also during the Q&A, he will jump in when needed to answer questions that came in through the chat and that I'm maybe not able to really keep track of. Before we really get started and I really share my screen, maybe some housekeeping rules. So be aware that this recording or this webinar is being recorded. For the people that couldn't join, they will get the recording later after a call, you as well, by the way. By default, your camera is off and your mic is muted. Please leave your mic muted. We have a very big audience today, which is great, but it means that we need to be a bit more strict on how interactive it can be. You can switch on your camera. It's always nice to see people, but don't feel obliged to do so. When it comes to Q&A, as said, we have a big group. So if you have questions, remarks, reflections, feel free to share them in the chat. When possible, I'll try to address them on the spot when relevant, but most probably we do have a bit of time at the end of the webinar, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Let me share my screen, and then we can get really started. Well, here we are. So carbon accounting, the end of the spreadsheet era. In this short webinar, we will try to explain why we as a company see the end of spreadsheets being used for carbon accounting coming to an end. And the topics we want to address is, first of all, a quick intro on why carbon accounting is important. I guess for most of you, you're already convinced or you will be familiar with what we say, but I think it's always good to really set the stage that we all start from the same page. And then we'll go to really the content of the webinar, why the end of the spreadsheet era. And there we will jump back and forth between the slides that we will also share with you and our carbon accounting platform, just to give you an example on how we, for instance, address certain issues or challenges when it comes to carbon footprinting. We've also invited Marina Bradford from Bemari, a UK-based sustainability consultant, and she will reflect on the topics that I will address in the first 30 minutes. So that you also get more an outside view or a different perspective on the topics that we will discuss. And then, as said, by the end of the call, the last 20 minutes is blocked for Q&A. So feel free to share thoughts, reflections, questions in the chat, and we will address them for sure in the last part of the hour that we have. So why carbon accounting? A lot of companies want to know their carbon footprint, and every year more and more companies want to know their carbon footprint. The figure that you see here on the left shows the year-on-year increase of companies disclosing their carbon footprint through CDP. So CDP is a voluntary program where companies can, on a voluntary basis, so it's not mandatory, it's really a voluntary basis, disclose their carbon footprint. And you see that the growth has been steady around 10% for the last decade. But as of 2019, there was a big surge, step back in 2020. I think we all know why. But last year, 2021, there was a 40% increase. So it's year-on-year increase in number of companies reporting on their carbon footprint. So you see that more and more companies start to disclose their carbon footprint. And there are basically three main reasons for that. One is regulation. It's mainly anticipating for regulation. And there a game changer will be the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is a European directive. We will make it mandatory for all companies larger than an SME to report on a set of sustainability parameters, including carbon footprint. This legislation will go into force 2024, 2025, 2026, depending a bit on exactly what type of company you are. So that regulation is still in the pipeline. In some countries, you have national regulation forcing companies to disclose their carbon footprint. But another driver that's already today very strong is basically the financial world, investors, bank, asking on transparency of the companies in which they invest or companies to which they grant a loan, for instance. And BlackRock, the largest asset management firm on earth, is very vocal on that and really makes the point that, okay, we only invest in companies with a clear climate strategy, that it's very clear for us how they will remain competitive in the low carbon world. And if that's not the case, we just don't want to put our money in that because that company will have a weaker competitive position going forward. A third reason why companies disclose their carbon footprint is customers and employees that really just ask to these companies, hey, what is your carbon footprint and what are you doing about it? Because large customers want to source with green suppliers, and employees, in particular, highly educated young employees, want to work with companies that really have a sustainable plan and want to address climate change. One example of that is what's happening in the retail sector, where you see that, for instance, Deleuze, but also other large retailers are really screening their supply chain almost down to the level of individual farmers to really track the carbon footprint of their supply chain. But the problem today is that, or in order to make it happen and to really facilitate it, all those companies can disclose their carbon footprint, carbon accounting will need to become a commodity. However, today it's not. Today you see that companies do it often on ad hoc and a project basis, and they will need to do it on a more recurring basis. Carbon accounting today is mainly done by specialists, highly trained, typically engineers, and they spend a lot of time on process management, data processing, just to make the job done. In the future, really to make it a commodity, these specialists will need to focus on tailored advice, and the more operational work needs to be done by operational resources and software. And in terms of tooling, and that's of course a link on what we will talk about today, is that in terms of tooling today, it's still a spreadsheet world with all pros and cons of Excel spreadsheets, but we'll need to move to dedicated carbon footprint software just to make everything more efficient, faster, and more standardized. And in that way, carbon accounting will become a commodity, just as financial accounting is a commodity. And those who know me know that I like a lot to compare carbon accounting with financial accounting, also in terms of business model. The business model for us is very similar, where on the one hand, you have companies that need to know their carbon footprint and that need to evolve towards a climate neutral future, just as companies know their the financial numbers and want to have a financial plan. These companies, they don't need tooling, they don't need software. At first, they need experts. They need human experts that they can call, that can provide expert input and also kind of a peace of mind to make sure that, hey, we have someone who knows how it's done and these people will support us on the way. Maybe very big companies can internalize this more service offering, but a lot of medium-sized companies are looking for an external expert to really support them in the trajectory towards climate neutrality. And then the third piece of the puzzle is software. It's dedicated carbon accounting software, like for instance, the one that we have developed to support the sustainability experts in supporting the companies in becoming climate neutral. And again, it's very similar to how financial accounting world works, where you have a lot of different financial accounting software being used by financial accountants or financial service providers to then manage the financial statement and performance of companies. So that in a nutshell, why carbon accounting is important and also why carbon accounting needs to become a commodity. And a direct result of that is, according to us, we're very close to the end of the spreadsheet era. So as said before, today, carbon accounting is mainly done in spreadsheets, highly trained sustainability consultants using Excel spreadsheets, but we believe we're very close to the end of that. And we see 5 reasons that will mean or result in the end of the spreadsheet era. The first, and it's actually the most important one, is auditability. You see that carbon footprint calculations are becoming more and more audited by third parties. And by the way, it's also in the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive where they impose what they call a limited assurance. But it's clear that these kind of calculations will become more audited. Again, just as financial statements are being audited. So companies that calculate their carbon footprint, for them, it's really important that they have kind of an audit trail. So that's very clear where the data comes from, who edited the data, and when the data was edited. That there is version control, there is a linking back to source data. Just to make it very transparent how the carbon footprint is done, so that it can be very easily audited by a third party. And here you very quickly run into the limitations of what you do with spreadsheets. So let me jump to our software and show you how we do it in the carbon accounting platform that we have. So here we are. So here you see our platform. It's a browser-based platform, so you log in, and I will show you the demo version. So all the data that you will see here is dummy data. It's not from a real company, of course. So if you log in, you see our dashboard with, in this case, the carbon footprint of the company Acme, calculated for 2 years, scope 1 and 2, and the full scope 3 of their carbon footprint. So how is our platform being used for audits? If a company wants to audit its carbon footprint, it basically does 2 things. One, you can download a standardized report, detailed report that you can share with the auditor. And the report looks like this. It's a standardized report summarizing all details of the carbon footprint. What are the boundaries? What is the carbon footprint, including all details of the different greenhouse gas emissions. What are the technical disclaimers? This is rather dry technical, but it's important for an auditor to make sure that he or she really understands the details of the carbon footprint. And then also the standardized reporting tables according to the greenhouse gas protocol with the exact naming as outlined in the greenhouse gas protocol. And the same goes for the ISO 14064 standard. So this is a technical report, is a starting point of an audit by a third party. But then typically the auditor also wants to have access to the platform, so you can give him access, and then the auditor will review specific granular data points. So then that person can go to the inventory, and here we collect all granular data points of the carbon footprint for the different activities. So for instance, very simple example, right? If the carbon footprint of the heating, so burning fossil fuels to generate heat, needs to be checked. For instance, let's take the example here of office building. You zoom in, and here the auditor can see all the details of the carbon footprint. So what is the emission factor that we use? What is the source of the emission factor? It's listed here in the notes field. Maybe some additional assumptions or notes that the carbon footprint consultant has taken. In this case, there's also a supporting document uploaded to really make sure or prove that this was the real consumption of that company to heat their office building. So that's a way, here you see as well, by the way, that we keep an audit trail. So here you see who edited the data when. In this case, I did it. So that's why you see me and not my full name. So in that way, we facilitate with the platform auditing of carbon footprinting. The second reason why spreadsheet error will very quickly come to an end has to do with compliance. We as sustainability people are living in a changing world, meaning that the rules of doing carbon footprints are changing on basically a continuous basis. Changes in the protocols, changing in frameworks, reporting frameworks. Emission factors are becoming outdated every year, or new emission factors are being published. Changes in legislation, national, European level. So it is a continuous job to be done to make sure that tooling that you use to calculate the carbon footprint remains up to date and remains compliant to all those changing parameters or changing landscape. And if you are just a consultant using your own spreadsheet, it's quite a bit of work to make sure that your own spreadsheet remains up to date. So it's the cost of compliancy. It's way cheaper if you can spread that cost across a large group of users. So that's why there is an important cost benefit for tool providers to make sure that they build software that is compliant and they offer this compliancy as a service to a large group of users. So to illustrate how we do that, so we do keep track of all the changing protocols, frameworks, emission factors, and so on. And to give you one example, for instance, on emission factors. So what we do, we have different sets of emission factors. Some are freely available, some we are reseller like EcoInvent, and you need to pay for them. But the basic emission factor data set that we often use are the ones from the UK Government Agency on Climate. It used to be DEFRA. So let me show how it works so you can access that database also through our platform. And let's say that, let's take an example of road transport. I'm only interested in the equivalent CO2 emissions. I want to have it in kilometer driven for, let's say, petrol or diesel. Let's take diesel, and I want to have it for an average car. So here you see that we are 18 carbon or emission factors remain. You see for the different years from 2014 up to 2021, the emission factor that we use, and we do annual updates. By the way, for every year you see two, scope 1 and scope 3. It's of course exactly the same one, but in our extensive database, we split it up. So you see here, for instance, the average car in 2014 emitted 185 grams of carbon emissions equivalents per driven kilometer, and every year it decreases up to around 168 grams of carbon emissions equivalent per driven kilometer last year. So this annual updates, it's an example of work or a job that we do so that our users can always use the latest, most recent emission factors. A third point, besides auditability and compliancy, is about standardization. And here I can tell a small anecdote. So we talk to a lot of sustainability consultants across Europe, and we often hear the story like, yes, we do carbon footprinting in spreadsheets. And actually, we used to have one master Excel spreadsheet that all our consultants had to use, and that was very clean and tight and correct. But then how it goes is after a while, if you have 50 consultants, you have 50 different versions of a spreadsheet. So we hear these stories in a lot of different sustainability consultants. And then knowing, going back to the first point, that these kind of calculations will become audited by third parties, you as a consultant, you have a considerable liability risk. If there are mistakes in the carbon footprint that you do, and your company is being accused of greenwashing for it or gets a claim for it, you also have this liability risk. So it's very important that if you do your carbon footprint, you do it in a structured, standardized way to minimize the probability for errors. And the way that we facilitate that, for instance, in our platform, is to offer the options to predefine certain settings. They can be overwritten to tailor them, but to predefine certain settings to make sure that everyone is working with the same structure. And for instance, boundaries there are very important. So boundaries, according to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, is basically what part or which part of the organization are you considering in your carbon footprint. So it is about the reporting periods. It's about the organizational units that you are including. And most importantly, it's also about what or which activities are you considering. Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, full Scope 3, certain parts. So here we have a reporting or a template layer on top of the activities of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So you see all carbon footprint activities of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. And here on the level of sustainability consultant, you can kind of rename them and set them fixed. For instance, to say that for every service company, you always make sure that you consider all relevant scope 3 activities and kind of predefine that on the level of a consultancy so that all your consultants working with the software are using the same structure of activity categories. Another example is on reporting. So in the greenhouse gas protocol, there are some options, so to speak, for instance, on how do we report on electricity, market-based, location-based. We report on both, but you can still pick one as the default way of reporting. Same goes for radiative forcing with air travel related emissions. So you see it's already rather technical, but these kind of settings can really make a difference in what a company reports in terms of their carbon footprint. So it's important that as a consultancy, you do it in a standardized ways for all your companies or type of companies in the same way, so that it's very standardized and that you don't get into issues with it when there are mistakes. Oops, sorry, that was the wrong button. I still wanted to share my screen and just jump back to the presentation. So that brings us to number 4. As said, we have 5, so we're over halfway. A fourth one is on time efficiency. So how much time is needed to calculate the carbon footprint? And there, the role of dedicated software is to automate as much as possible the dull and repetitive work that is always part of the carbon footprint. So think about the reporting, think about the mapping of emission factors with activity data. Think about importing, uploading activity data. So that's one source of time efficiency. Another source, it's about what we call streamlining the process. So just to make sure that all information, all stakeholders are working together on one platform, rather than having different files flying around in emails, Google Drives, SharePoints, and the like. So that is also what we try to facilitate with our platform. And let me just show one example on how we do it. I will show you an example on data imports. So we have a functionality where you can import Excel spreadsheets. As software engineers, we really like a lot to have automated software integrations through our API, for instance, but we see that the world we're still living in is very much a spreadsheet world in terms of data availability in companies. So what happened a lot is that you get, for instance, data of a company that looks like this. It's an example for electricity, and they just made an extract from an energy management system where they report on electricity consumption on a monthly basis. We have 24 data points here. The first 12 are about their procured electricity. The last 12 ones are the ones on own green electricity generation. So this file, you don't want to manually add the 24 lines. So that's what that file, you can put it through our import functionality. Then, of course, it's a free template, so you don't know exactly what the data is about, in what structure it comes. So of course, you need to help the software a bit so that the software understands what the data is about. So in the second step, you map the columns. So you see you read all data, and then in green, you have all parameters that we need to know to calculate the carbon footprint. So through a drag and drop system, you can make sure that you map the right parameters to the right columns, like this. It's my notes field. I don't have the organizational unit, but that's okay. I can still adjust it later on. And then we go to a verification phase. So what we do here, and that's why it takes a couple of seconds, is we make sure that 1, do we have all data? 2, can we read all data correctly? And then the third step is, as you see, we already calculate the carbon footprint. So it's around 40 tons of CO2 equivalents of these 24 lines. And then the final step is really approving the entries one by one to make sure that it's correct. You can still change some individual lines, leave them out, change the organizational unit, for instance. And then you can import these 24 lines and they go up into the inventory and it becomes part of your carbon footprint. As well, the original file that you started from is attached to the inventory. So that again, if the carbon footprint is being audited, it's always clear from which source data it was started to calculate the carbon footprint. A final point is on insights. So insights, we have been talking a lot about the process of efficient and correct reporting on the historical carbon footprint. I think that's very important, and a lot of companies are still in the phase that they just are struggling with calculating their historical carbon footprint. But of course, in order to really become climate neutral, measuring your carbon footprints, it's not a goal in itself, it's a means to an end. And that end is really understanding what drives the carbon footprint and helping companies with identifying the most cost-efficient way towards climate neutrality. And if you are a software company like we, and you collect a lot of granular data points on the carbon footprint of companies, you can start to do a lot of interesting things with it. And one of the features, for instance, that we have built is what we call simulation tool that supports companies and consultants in scenario simulations on where the carbon footprint will be in 5, 10, 15 years from now. So let me quickly show you how it works or how it looks. So it's a simulation tool, and this is the output. So it's resulting figures. So what you see here is the carbon footprint from 2021, which was the last year for which the historical carbon footprint was calculated, 10 years into the future, up to 2031. And you see the evolution both in time, that's the left figure, as well the evolution by action or by group of actions. So in this very simple case, we've identified 2 actions that are very important for this company. They need to work on their waste from their production process, and they need to optimize their last mile delivery. So how it works, and here you really see how we think about software and sustainability experts and the interplay between ad hoc tailored expertise and the role of a software provider. So it's the sustainability expert that's identifying, okay, for this company, what are the most relevant actions and how far can we go in reducing their carbon footprint with this action. So that means that it's the expert proposing different actions and identifying the impact of these actions. We propose some very common used actions, but it's still always the job of a sustainability expert to tailor the action to the company for which they're managing the carbon footprint. And then once the actions are identified, what we do as a software provider is to make sure that we calculate in the back what it means. So we do the calculations and support the simulation with these figures and graphical insights. And I think that that's very important point on how software and sustainability experts go hand in hand to together support companies in becoming climate neutral. So that was a quick walk through the 5 points that are, according to us, the 5 reasons why we are very close to the end of the spreadsheet era in carbon footprinting. And with that, kind of on time, I'm more than happy to give the floor to Marina. Marina, I'm not sure you are in the call, if you can unmute, and curious to hear your reflections. Are you there, Marina? Let me unmute herself. Yes, so let me quickly try to unmute Marina. My apologies for that. I don't know, Felix, are there already any questions that you can take up in the meantime?
Yeah, I'm happy to take the stage for a second. A lot of questions. It was hard to keep up with them. I think a lot of specialized questions on all kinds of very typical, I would say, consultants, sustainability experts concerns. So I want to address a few things regarding emission factors. So we do have a basic set of emission factors that we base our our drop down selection in the main inventory on, but it doesn't mean that that is the only thing that you should that you should follow those emission factor set necessarily. You can opt in to choose other ones So we have some other sets predefined that you can choose from, but you can also actually choose to upload your own custom one. We're working on that part, but that's coming up soon. So that was a thing I saw a few times. I want to stress that we definitely do Scope 3 emissions. Some people keep asking that. Yeah, that's definitely what we support. And maybe I should now give the word back to Marina, or is she still unmuted?
I think she should be able to unmute. Is that correct, Marina? No?
She can wave. Still counts.
Yes, very good. Because normally I've given permission to all participants to unmute. So at least it shows very clearly that Marina is not part of Carbon+Alt+Delete and that she's really an external person, right? That she's not able to unmute herself. Any other questions we could already take in the meantime?
Yeah, I'll continue with the questions. Yeah, some specific things about if we support bioemissions, which we do. There were some questions regarding even radiative forcing. I saw like how we approach that. And the thing is that we allow the user to choose between reporting or non-reporting the non-CO2 effects of air travel. And I see that Marina.
I'm here. I've got my voice.
Yes.
I think I've got my voice now. Thank you very much, everyone.
No worries. Go ahead, Marina.
Thanks so much, Kenneth and Felix, for giving the time on the floor. I think, first of all, yeah, my name is Marina Bradford. I'm based in the UK, and I'm a founder of Bimari Consultancy. And one of the things we do is climate sustainability support, so carbon accounting at operations level. And I think first of all, I just want to echo everything that Kenneth was saying in terms of the simplification benefits that this software offers. I've looked at quite a number of different tools, and as softwares come up, it's been a bit of an explosion. I'm kind of trying to understand what would be most useful for clients and what would be most useful for us. And definitely there is a very clear focus of this particular software on supporting the consultant. And I think that's the main benefit that initially drew me towards it, because there is all of those things that Kenneth was talking about in terms of transparency, flexibility, being able to manipulate the data, manipulate the emission factors, and create the structure and create the even the naming conventions, really the way that your client requires that and the way that makes sense to your client, which I haven't seen in a lot of other softwares that may have been either targeting the organizations themselves or may have been targeting consulting world. I think the other thing to mention is that the software is quite flexible. I have found it to be that way. Flexible, not just in terms of the kind of activities and operations that I was able to calculate, but also flexible in terms of the size of the organizations, but also ourselves, right? Because a lot of the times there's really good tools that are really geared to multi-million, multi-country, really large clients, actually really large consultancies. And that really does price you out, but also it gives you too much complexity for what you're trying to do, where your clients are maybe middle-sized organizations or larger with multiple countries, but it's still not something that they have an appetite for, because where the clients are in their journey also really does vary. So you don't really want something with too many bells and whistles when somebody's just starting up and just trying to understand how the data world in carbon accounting really works. So, sort of the baseline accounting. So that ability to flex between complexity as well as simplification was really, really helpful. All of the things that Ken's talking about in terms of transparency and traceability of what changes and where the data came from really made it sort of Excel, but in a really, really nice and much more user-friendly way for me. So actually we did say bye to Excel, where we did to do for most of the work. I will be honest, for most, some things will still remain. For example, things like commuting service, that sort of stuff, and working from home, you'd have to do some sort of service, some sort of basic calculation outside. You can then transfer most of the results, but just sort of, due to the complexity and how you collect the data. So it really did simplify the world. I think personally, my eyesight goes when you start looking at lots of formulas and links and sheets, and something inevitably goes wrong somewhere between the first starting point when you were building it and towards the end. And that really did, take that away, because you come back and it's still structured, it still makes sense, no matter what hour of the day it is, and you actually have really good visualization that is live, and it pulls the information through even if you change that. And these are kind of really small things, but when you're creating presentations to the clients with the results, some of you probably use different tools. We use PowerPoint to then feedback what the findings are and kind of communicate the process. A really easy thing where you can just save the visuals as a PNG is really helpful, avoiding all the screenshotting and copying and pasting and all that sort of stuff. So some of these small kind of tweaks and features and characteristics are really tailored to a consultant in the middle. And I found it really beneficial, because being able to use it for what we need and actually be able to flex that was really, really time saving, but also just very professional. You kind of feel a little bit better about what you're doing in some ways, because you don't feel like you're inventing the wheel every single time. So I think those are the key things. I'm not going to go over everything else that Kenneth was talking about, just kind of echo that definitely has rung true for us. The other thing is the evolution of the tool, because I think some of the softwares I have come across, they have an offering, that's how it looks, that's how it works. You have that limitation, and kind of, there isn't necessarily always an alignment to how you might want to apply it. I have seen the tool evolve significantly over time, and Kenneth and Felix have been really responsive. We've had a number of conversations in terms of what we're looking for, how it addresses, what the roadmap is. So I can really see how it's moving in a direction of where we are moving, of where the client world is moving, sort of as the world matures as well in this space. So that's been really, really nice to see. And I think just in terms of practicalities, we are based in the UK. Clients have operations in the UK and other countries, which means custom emission factors, which means different locations, which means different databases, and that has been accommodated for. So there are functionalities within the tool that allow you to do custom emission factors. Again, you can see how you have come up with them, and where the emission factors do exist in databases, you can pull them through. So that really does help to work in a very flexible manner in terms of even geographical spread. I have seen in the chat some people have mentioned things like LCA emission factors or other databases. For scope 3, that's exactly how we work. So there will be data that is activity driven, so there will be data that will be spend driven in absence of anything better. There will in some cases be supplier specific or LCA specific factors, and I've been able to put all of that into the system and work with that, and put the sources in the notes, etc., as Kenneth was mentioning. So from my perspective, that's been really helpful. In terms of the client element, I think one thing with some of the tools that I have seen before is you can use the tool to build carbon baseline, and then you share that with the client. Client can take the tool over and kind of without us going forward, which sometimes probably is the ideal case scenario, but I've never actually seen it work in practice, because the tools that are tailored to clients don't work well for consultants, and therefore you can't actually do that first step. The tools that work really well for the consultants don't well work for clients, because the clients don't really have the same level of understanding. So trying to use the one for two purposes, which is what I was trying to find before, actually is not a thing that I have found a solution to, because it's either one or the other. And I think in this case, in terms of to share with the client, there is enough detail and there is enough visual to help the conversation along, but it is not going to be something I'm going to be suggesting, and kind of puts you in a nice independent position, because then you can say, well, here is your baseline, here is your strategy, here's recommendations. You do need a tool as a client, as an organization going forward, but we can be impartial and we can just help you find the right one for you, and we will stick with the tool and structure that we are applying here. So I think all in all, very positive, definitely keeping and staying and involving and sort of bringing more on board. One call out I will say is that in terms of the different countries and conventions. We are in the UK. It's a tiny thing we're talking about, and I'm sure it's going to be addressed. But commas and digits and full stops are different in Europe than they are in the UK. So depending which country you guys are in, just kind of look out for that. But I'm sure that's going to amend it. But that's kind of something you'll see in lots of different international databases and tools anyway. So just kind of watching out for zeros was the one thing for me. But the amount of time saved outside of that, just not really comparable at all. I think that's probably a summary, but I did see my name pinged somewhere. I think Francois, was it?
I'm not entirely sure, because I tried to follow questions while you are speaking, but there was a question that was very relevant that was asking, Marina, how do your customers feel about sharing their data on a platform? Did they have any reluctance on their part to see that?
From the data perspective, no reluctance, because I think when they sign up with a consultant, they're sharing the data, and obviously they're signing up to whatever the NDAs they require, and they know that data is required. I have had data collected from clients via multiple means, be the G drives, emails, client drives, or whatever it is. They never really worried about how we are calculating on our side, and we just sort of transparently disclose that. So I don't see this any different. In fact, probably better to know that it's sitting in a tool as opposed to various sort of personal email addresses.
Thanks a lot, Marina, to share your reflections. Thanks a lot. I think very insightful. And also, I mean, we've been talking a lot, of course, but it's very interesting to again hear your perspectives. Moving on to the final part, which is the Q&A. I think there are more questions in the chat that we can answer in 15 minutes. But what I propose, and I'm looking to you, Felix, if you could pick some that were quite often recurring. The ones that we are not able to address, we will get back to you over email. I also saw, Marina, I'm not sure, maybe even other questions pointed to you. So if okay, we will also maybe share your contact details that people can reach out to you directly if they want to know more about your experiences. Maybe,
Very
and then
happy.
Felix to give. All right, great, thanks a lot. Felix, to give you one more minute to pick the right question. There's one that I saw popping up quite often related to software integrations. I will not answer the specific questions on integration between our tool and specific packages. But in general, the way that we look at it is, yes, we are a software provider. We have an API. We love to integrate with other software platforms, both incoming to read data on energy consumption, on flights, on you name it, but also outgoing, right? If companies have existing dashboarding and they just want to read the carbon footprint and merge it into their overall business dashboard, that's all great. So technically, we facilitate a lot. The reality is, and that's our perception, is that often the business case for an automated integration is not yet there, because one, the data availability in a company is not yet good enough. Two, the frequency with which this data is needed is often too low to, if you only do it once a year or even every quarter, but it only takes you 5 minutes. Setting up an automated integration to save 10 minutes or 20 minutes a year, knowing that you might need to pass not only the sustainability department, but also the IT department, it's still often not yet the case. So in general, yes, technically we can facilitate it, but we often look at it case by case, whether there really is a business case. So that's a bit how we look at integrations.
Yeah,
Felix,
and
other
maybe
questions?
I'm not sure if you want to extend on like the connection to ERP packages. That's something that came up. That like in general.
There's someone unmuted. Let me mute everyone. Sorry, go ahead, Felix.
Yeah, I was just adding to your answer already, that the connection to ERP packages of companies that often companies that are very highly integrated with ERP packages are not looking at solutions similar to ours. So there's two questions that I think are very good ending points, which is about our difference with competitors and price, and I'm happy to do that towards the end. Maybe I think a lot of things that come back that I want to address regarding our relationship with emission factors. I don't know, am I taking that one, or are you doing that, Kenneth?
No, go ahead, Felix.
Yeah. So I think a lot of questions become very specific on like which emission factor we do, or how do we support certain changes in emission factors. I think it's important here to state our role as like a platform, which is a connection between different parties. So we are a platform where emission factors get used by experts, by consultants to help their clients. Which also means that like we provide all kinds of support for these emission factors. We also provide updates for the emission factor sets that are in our basic set, but we also allow connections to other databases. So we have external databases, LCA databases like EcoInvent that are connected to our platform, where you can very quickly look up like larger sets of emission factors, more than our basic sets. And we provide that kind of integration. Apart from that, it's also very common for a carbon expert like you to have calculated some parts yourself for a certain product of a client or something like that. And we definitely have an option to add custom elements to our database. We definitely see the need for that. When you're doing a project and you have this one emission factor that you calculated yourself, you can add that way. So we are an intersection point where all these kinds of things come together, like all your expertise, all the expertise that is integrated in data sets, and all the data that you need for your calculations. So we are not the ones making the calls, but we are the ones providing the solutions. I don't know. There were people have questions also about transparency, Kenneth. So if we support uploading of documents, and if we show show the way that we calculate and how things are determined. Maybe you can expand on that.
Sorry, come again, Felix. The line dropped for a second.
Yeah. So what we do in order to like help the consultant be more transparent towards their clients as well to external auditors.
Yes, exactly. So I think the main advantage is if you use this platform, that all data comes together in one platform and can be reviewed by all relevant stakeholders. So it really goes to the level of the granular data points that you collect, the emission factors that you use and where they come from, and the supporting documents, for instance, invoices of energy suppliers. So that gives a lot of transparency to the people in a company, and often they're surprised about, hey, is this so large in our carbon footprint? I was not aware that this is an important part. So that's really one kind of transparency that creates. But then second, also towards external people, reviewers, auditors, that they can really go down to the level of the individual data points that you have collected to calculate the carbon footprint and see what's behind it. And that level of transparency, I think it's a key driver. If you really look at it from a macro perspective, it's a key driver for us as a society and our economy as a whole to become climate neutral, right? If we don't have this transparency, it's very hard for clients to buy green products or work or buy at green companies. It's very difficult for investors to invest in green companies. It's very difficult for potential new employees to select the greenest employer that they want to work for. Maybe also in the interest of time, Felix, indeed, because there are way too many questions. What I propose is that we take one more question, the one on our competitive positioning and pricing. And then we'll take some time later today or probably tomorrow to come back to each one of you individually if we haven't addressed your question, and just to make sure that we wrap up well in time and respect your agenda.
15 seconds. A question that I saw pop up often is how we support different subsets or sub units of certain companies. So we do have hierarchical trees that you can add up to 4 levels deep to represent different countries, different parts of a company, and then you can choose to report or to filter your dashboard on these things, or maybe do comparisons between them.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So now, final question to you is how we relate to our competitors and pricing.
Yes. So I think first of all, we are of course not the only ones understanding the need for professional dedicated software to do carbon footprinting or even ESG reporting as a whole, right? And it's also a very big market, a lot of different companies, different size, different needs. So it's definitely not one solution fits all. And where we focus on, and I think that's really different than a lot of other tools that you might have seen, is we see a sustainability expert, a carbon accountant, a carbon consultant, name it as you like. We see these people as our key users because they do and run the calculations for their clients. So we have built our product for the sustainability consultant, not for the sustainability manager in the end company. And I think that's also a point that Marina made. And it means that I think we stay closer to the greenhouse gas protocol because we know that our users need the flexibility to turn all switches behind or below the hood, so to speak. So our product is tailored for that, but also our commercial or pricing model is tailored to that. So we have what we call per company license model. And so we sell licenses to consultancies, and we charge them per company for which they use our software. So if they use our software for 10 of their clients, it's 10 times the unit price. If they do it for 100 of their clients, it's 100 the unit price. And then, of course, there's a bit more complexity to it, depending on the exact size of the company, volume discounts, and the like. That goes way too deep for now. But the feedback that we get there is that it's very much tailored and it grows with the business of consultancies. I think everyone who is doing sustainability consultancy here in the call strongly believe or hopes, of course, that their business will also grow as a consultancy. And we as a software provider want to grow with your consultancy business. And our pricing model also facilitates that. And maybe one final remark to make on that. And that's also a more personal opinion and with what I've seen as business consultant working for different companies in the past, it's very hard to be a sustainability company, a consulting company and a software company at the same time. It can work for a couple of months, a couple of years, but it requires a completely different mindset. We as a software provider, we try to build one solution that fits all, and we are looking for the scale to, for instance, have enough users to make sure that the cost of compliancy is very low for us on a per user level. That's what we do. As a consultancy, you have a completely different mindset. Every client is unique, and you want to propose a unique proposition to a specific client tailored to the needs of that specific client. That's your core strength as a consultancy. And combining these two mindsets in one company, it's very hard. So either you build a product that is not scalable, so you're not really a software company, or your consulting is too much standardized and you're not really a good consultancy. So that's why we very strongly believe in you're a software company, you support consultants, they do the tailoring, and they support the final companies. And again, it's not working for all companies, in all sectors, definitely not, but there is definitely a part of companies that really need this kind of approach, and that's where we focus on. So with that, I see, Felix, still a lot of questions, but I propose that we just really stop here and give people maybe 2 more minutes to grab a coffee before they maybe need to enter into another call. Felix, I see you want to make some final remarks.
You want to address the people that are asking how they can have a demo or have access to a demo account. They should contact us, right?
Yes. So one, you can always reach out to me directly. I'll put my email in the chat. But what we will also do is we will, over the course of the coming days, share the recordings, share the presentation, and there you will have all contact info to reach out to us directly to book a demo. So now we can take it from there and have a one-on-one discussion. So thanks a lot to all of you for joining. Again, great to see that so many of you are interested in the topic of carbon accounting. There is a lot of work to be done to become climate neutral. So looking forward to talk to you again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.